The Last Ronin was one of the greatest comic books to be released in the last decade, and today I want to show you why. Welcome to the first episode of the Monthly Comic Book Club, a new series where I intend to break down, explain, and kind of review different comic books. This is The Last Ronin, and it is an incredibly dark yet beautiful tale about the last of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on a mission of vengeance in order to regain the honor of his now dead family. To some of you, that might sound a little strange for something like the Ninja Turtles, a franchise built on bright colors and kids shows. But if you're anything like me, then you likely already know the Turtles have a surprisingly dark history as it is. In 1984, the TMNT debuted as an adult-targeted black and white comic book series parodying the edgy comics of the time, most notably Daredevil, where the Turtles swore, killed, and drank. It wasn't exactly the same as we know it today, and since then, the Turtles have delved back into their darker roots on more than one occasion. The comics are a clear example of that. The IDW run has on many cases been a grittier take of the characters, but even cartoons like the 2003 version and movies like the Michael Bay films have had somewhat less childish tones, should we say. And back when TMNT was created, their creators Laird and Eastman sat together and discussed what a story with these characters would be like in the future of their world. Well, we're now in the modern era, and Eastman has returned to that question with the help of the great Tom Waltz, and finally they answered it, presenting to us all The Last Ronin. The comic begins with the Ronin already on his mission, and he isn't alone. From the get-go, we learn he is haunted by his brothers. They follow him everywhere, commenting on his every move, his every decision, and he simply cannot avoid them. He is on a mission in a very John Wick style scenario. He is a lone warrior ascending through greater forces in search of revenge. And whilst on a surface level, reading this amazing series of events would seem like just that, there is an element of sloppiness. The Ronin is messy, unclean in his actions, and he relies heavily on luck. It's made very clear he's out of his element, and when he finally thinks he's found security in what seems to be sewers, he finds even they have changed. This is a man out of time. He doesn't belong. The very city is an enemy. Quickly, he is forced to confront the soldiers of his opposition, the Foot Clan, and he learns that they are no longer people, but synthetic ninjas. Half man, half machine. Even people are changing, becoming more controllable. And it's after this that we finally meet the target of our hero, Iroku Hiroto, last of his lineage. He is obsessed with control and power, and the Ronin is a threat to that. And so he must be eliminated. But not just eliminated, no. The capture and execution of the Ronin must be filmed and broadcast to everyone. And it becomes clear Hiroto's rule requires fear, and that is his weakness. Because without fear, the people he rules over will overthrow him. They will turn on him. He has expanded the Foot Clan to the entirety of New York, and yet seemingly none of the city is truly his clan, his family. They are just his subjects. Hiroto is located at the top of a tower, and now ascending it is the Ronin. And whilst climbing, he begins to explain his hatred for the Oroku name, and how his mission is to bring it to an end. But he also implies that he and Hiroto have never met. They haven't come face to face. This is a battle that is fought between generations, between families, but it isn't personal to the individuals. Hamato Yoshi and Oroku Saki began this war, and for 3 generations it is now continuing. The Ronin's reliance on luck soon comes to an end, as in a moment of arrogance, he is bested. Not by the target of his rage, but by a faceless machine one he has beaten time and time again in his youth. The machine tosses him from the tower, and he falls to what should be his death. Lay there, broken and beaten, the turtle looks up to a tower and a city all alone. New York is the Foot Clan's home now, and he is without one. Escaping before he can be collected, he flees beneath the city, to the sewers, to the closest thing to a home he has ever known. Looking over this, atop the city is Hiroto, who finds comfort in a similar way. Angered by the turtle's survival, he turns to speak with his family, his now comatose mother. Hiroto is an interesting character, and we'll dive more into him later, but I think it's really important he has this dynamic with Karai, his mother, for those of you not versed in Turtles lore. It establishes why he has such a distant connection to the living. The only source of love and family he has ever had is unconscious and effectively not even present. Like the Ronin, he is also alone, but unlike him, he has everything and everyone beneath him. And unlike the Ronin, he never knew what it was like to have a true family. The Ronin lays 4 turtle bandanas before him, and each weapon to match. Following that, he holds his father's journal and asks for forgiveness for failing. It's interesting to see this is the first time in the story he is able to quiet his brothers. He clears them from his mind. The thoughts and feelings running through his head are his own, and from that, he attempts seppuku, a traditional Japanese method of honorably ending your own life. And whether because of the fall from the tower, or the blood loss he is suffering, or maybe his brother's souls stopping him in a more spiritual way, or something else entirely, we don't know. But he fails to complete the ritual and collapses. His heart comes to a rest, and he wakes at home, surrounded by all his brothers. The Ronin is happy. He is at peace. This war with the Orokus is over until he returns to reality and sees April O'Neil nursing him back to health. It's important to note I skipped a couple points in the story to bring up here. Firstly, we are briefly introduced to Casey Marie Jones, April's daughter, and she finds the Ronin in the sewers when he collapses, bringing him home to her mom. It'll make more sense later, but this is super important for the themes and the true meaning behind the Ronin story as a whole. The second part I want to mention is a phrase the Ronin says throughout the story, but most notably before he, stabs himself. Never lose focus. I don't believe any of the things I listed are why he doesn't die in that moment, or why he survives the fall from the tower, or even why he returns from the brief paradise he experiences. The Ronin is empowered by his mission, his need to bring honor back to his name and avenge his brothers, his father and his friends. He refuses to lose focus, and that focus is what keeps him from dying. The first issue ends on a reveal of the Ronin's identity, which of the 4 turtles he really is.
Each party in the sand, gonna surf the sewer, gonna get a green tan, but just when they thought,
what's going on down there? Why, it's the Rock and Rollin' Turtles with Leo on lead guitar.
Yeah, and it's a big hit.
Yoinks! It's Mike and April on the Ninja News Cycle, arriving.
In 1987, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles moved from dark, gritty comics to the bright and colourful world of toy ads and cartoons. It was in this transition that toy companies and marketing realized that if each turtle was identifiable, then kids would be more likely to want to buy their individual figures, no matter how identical they might actually be. And so 2 elements were added to the brothers. Each turtle had their bandana recolored, from them all being red to now a blue, purple, orange and red setup. And to accompany this, each had their own core personality trait installed. Leonardo, the leader in blue, he's a skilled combatant, works by the books, and believes in honor and protecting those who rely on him. Donatello does machines, wears purple, and is at times an outsider, making up for that with sheer intelligence. Raphael's cool but rude. Initially, his character was mostly interpreted as just being sarcastic, but over time he evolved, becoming the more emotional of the group, often known for his outbursts and misguided rage, stemming from care care and love, but directed into violence. Honestly, any of these would be perfect candidates for the Ronins. Leonardo watching as his leadership fails and his family falls before him, Raphael's anger and uncontrollable attitude causing the downfall of those around him, or even Donatello's unempathetic mind struggling to cope with the loss of all he loves. But it's interesting that it's the fourth brother who would become the Ronin. Michelangelo is a party guy, but he's also often depicted as the younger brother, usually fun and relaxed, possibly even naive at times. And most notably, he has always been the most empathetic of the turtles. And it is losing everyone that turns him bitter and hardens his heart. He truly is the perfect choice for the Ronin's journey because of how drastically different it makes him. When I first read this story, I adored issue 1, and whilst I still do, it's for so many different reasons. Before, I thought the action and the mystery of the Ronin were what made it special, but now I realize it's so much more. It's the breaking of Mikey's mind. It's the way it weaves the core elements yet to happen into the story, and how at this state, this point in his life that feels like the final moment, the end of the road, he still isn't able to end his family's war. It's the fact that the Ronin fails. The second issue establishes itself with April in bed, and here we see how she views life. It's tragic, really. She wakes up, tears in her eyes, as everything around her forces the memories and trauma of the past onto her. She is missing an arm and a leg from an event we'll get to soon enough, but one that's permanently scarring, and I don't just mean physically. And she is reminded of this as she equips each of her prosthetics every morning, and then she has to face the mask of her now dead husband, Casey Jones. April O'Neil reflects Mikey. The Ronin left. He remained the same as he was, but darker, losing everything he had. April stayed, adapting physically to the times, but remembering what she had. She isn't haunted by ghosts like Mikey, but she is haunted by the world surrounding her. And as her pain sinks in, we are shown her memories. It's what I can only assume is roughly 20 years ago, give or take. Casey and April are celebrating their engagement with who they would call family. But this celebration is ruined. Not only do they consider the Turtles family, but the Turtles consider them as well. And so, when they are ambushed by the Foot Clan, it's April's home the Turtles flee to. Raphael is the first to enter. Driven in a fury, he clears the tables and struggles to say what he needs to. Splinter, their father, was injured. Soon after, Donatello and Michelangelo bring him in to rest. Leonardo had stayed behind to defend the family and fend off the Foot Clan while they ran to safety. Casey is much like Leo. He needs to protect the family he has built. Their reasoning differs, but the two put themselves before the others at all times, and so he offers to go back for Leo. This is where Raphael really shows his mindset. He seizes the opportunity, but he isn't going back just for Leo, he's going back for revenge. He wants to hunt down and kill all of the Foots. But in that moment, Raphael's eagerness is paused as his leader, Leonardo, returns and tells everyone to stay put. Whilst the family wonder why the Foot broke their treaty and Splinter predicts an end to their war, Raph leaves, driven by his anger. As I said in chapter 1, Raphael is an emotional character. He loves his family to a dangerous level and often loses himself in moments like this. It is common across Turtles media for Raphael to go on his own and attempt to take out these frustrations on enemies who are a greater threat than he might at first realize. However, the common theme amongst these tales are that Raphael's weaknesses are protected by his brothers, as are all of their weaknesses. And so, when he is in over his head, his brothers arrive at his side to save him and help. The issue in this moment is that Splinter is in mortal danger, and Raphael has chosen a target far stronger than usual, meaning he will be on his own. Michelangelo struggles to communicate with his brothers. While alone, exploring his old home, he is confronted again by their ghosts, and what was once brotherly banter becomes grating to him. It drives him to anger. It seems all he wants is to see them again, but hearing their voices, having them with him, is only breaking him more. The brothers talk about what happened and how it's possible April survived, and as the conversation evolves, they move on to Raph's hot-headedness and how his death meant he wasn't there when Mikey needed him. But this image he has conjured up of his brothers doesn't sympathize with him. They call him weak. They berate him for trying to quit, for trying to end his own suffering, for losing focus. Michelangelo is using his brothers' voices, his memories of them, to force himself into this mission, to keep his mind on a set track, and as he wavers and falls, they beat him back into it, but slowly destroying his psyche in the process. And as this moment comes to an end and the Ronin loses control, yelling and silencing the sound of his brothers, he is able to recenter himself, to find his focus, and he declares that the last Oroku will die. The night Raphael left, he had one thought in his mind as well. In a way, he too was focused. He believed Oroku Karai must die. Hunting her and the Foot Clan wasn't difficult. Taking them on, however, was. He was a one-man army against a militia of ninjas. Raph took blow after blow, but his rage only grew and the pain became unnoticeable after a point. And much like Michelangelo did with Hiroto, Raph called out to Karai. He called her a coward. He told her she needed to face him herself to end this war between their clans once and for all. But unlike with Mikey, Karai accepted. The two fought valiantly, and eventually they found themselves at the docks. Blow for blow, they were pretty much even. And now, cornered, Karai began to falter, Raph taking the upper hand. Unfortunately, he moved too cocky. He whiffed a critical moment, allowing Karai to dive with him into the river below. And as they sank lower into the depths, they continued to exchange blows until Raphael stabbed his sai into Karai's back, and she pushed her blade into his chest. The two prepared to die in order to end this everlasting battle. But a hand reached out, and saved by her clan, Karai was pulled to the surface, whilst Raphael, alone in this moment, drew his final breath and rests at the riverbed. Karai survived because she was not alone. But like Michelangelo in his rampage on the city, Raphael was. He didn't have his family at his side. Looking back to issue 1, the Ronin survives because Casey Marie, unknown to him, but that's his family, his clan, saves him. He is as much like Raph as he is like Karai in this story. As far as he was concerned, he was Raphael there. Luckily for him, he was closer to Karai than he knew. But it is also clear that Michelangelo has not yet learned the lesson of his brother's death. He hasn't studied the past in order to move forwards. He has only used it as a fuel for his anger, for his rage. This is why he fails at first. This is why he can't possibly win, because at the end of the day, he is alone. This all begins to shift in the Ronin's next encounter with April. Here, she introduces the turtle to her daughter and opens the possibility of expanding his family and training her. Mikey has been alone for a long time, but this teenager represents the end of that. He doesn't necessarily know that in this moment, but it's true. She is the return of his family. Of course, Hiroto's family endeavors are quite the opposite to Michelangelo's. He is busy training with his men by beating them to near death. It's quite interesting, actually, since the last time he spoke to his captain, he said if he didn't kill the turtle, he'd have his head on a spike. And well, we learn he wasn't exactly joking. It's made ever clear that this clan, the Foot, they aren't a loyalty or respect based clan. They are more so controlled by threats and punishment. Hiruto, unlike Mikey, has a family, a clan, handed to him on a silver platter, and yet he actively chooses to ruin that connection, those ties, by turning himself into a true monster. Raphael's death isn't the only flashback this issue. Casey Marie asks Mikey where he's been, why he wasn't there, fighting by her side, and why come back now. At first, he claims the city was too much to handle, too much trauma and baggage behind it, but it isn't long before he admits the truth. You see, after seemingly losing everything, Michelangelo didn't bubble up with rage. He didn't open his eyes to vengeance and swear to slay Hiroto in the Oroku house. He just wanted to die. He gave up. And so he ascended a mountain and lay there in the icy snow and the cold, sharp winds, but his body wouldn't let him die. The comic really tries to explain this as his mutation protecting him, but really I view it as his incompleteness, his need to regain honor, and his need to finish the mission, end the war. Whilst here he eventually stopped trying to die and started meditating, caring for the grounds he slept on, and felt as though he reached enlightenment, hidden away from the world below him. And then the world found him, the evil of man, killing for fun, without honor. And that's when the true enlightenment struck. His purpose, his mission, the gases of hate and misery that had filled his soul, now met a spark of violence that turned them into a fiery inferno of rage. He made a vow in that moment to study his father's book, master the art of the ninja to its fullest, and via the battlefield restore honor to his clan and those who fight without it. Now, for the sake of the story, this is all we need. It's amazing and really shows the shift in Michelangelo and how it formed. When you see classic Mikey, he doesn't seem like the type to really snap. And if we hop on over to the IDW world, the closest he's ever gotten to this is when he entered a severely depressed state. That being said, there is more to his journey back from the mountains. It was all explored in The Last Ronin's The Lost Days, a prequel comic I highly recommend, although we aren't going to talk about that too much here. But overall, this establishes why he is the way he is in Chapter 1. He is rage-filled and vendetta-driven. He has mastered the physical training, but not the mental elements. He still hasn't processed his loss. He hasn't learned from the lessons of yesterday, and so he made the same error Raphael did. He continues to fight and push against the right path. Michelangelo believes he isn't entitled to peace, and that is made clear when the final page of Splinter's book is revealed. The lesson bestowed by Mikey to himself: no peace. Looking back to the day of his rise to power, we see Hiruto gain control of the Foot Clan. Here we can see the trail of events that spiraled from Raphael's outbursts. Karai entered a coma and the Foot Clan began a full-out war with the Hamato clan. But on this day, Hiruto decided the type of leader he would become for his clan, one that ends this war, and so he called for a peace summit with Master Splinter himself. But just as Michelangelo is now learning to do, present-day Hiruto has learned from his younger self, and has decided he does not intend to call for a meeting with Michelangelo the Ronin. Instead, he airs to the world a warning. No, a threat, and instates martial law over his city. Hiruto is a creature of control, and at all costs, he strives to maintain that control, even if it means working alongside people he would rather see exterminated. As the city above transforms into panic and rioting, deep below, April and Mikey sit in comfort, catching each other up on what they have done in the time they were apart. When Donatello and Splinter left for Japan to meet Hiruto for the peace talks, the rest of the clan were left behind, and seizing that moment, an old enemy of theirs allied himself with the Foot and decided to strike. Baxter Stockman is an iconic villain from the Turtles mythos, most known for his hubris and genius intellects. He usually despises everyone and finds the Turtles mostly annoying for getting in the way of his attempts at gaining control or power. Naturally, he is a horrible fit for Hiroto's Foot, but Hiroto doesn't care for compatibility. He cares for what he can take, and Stockman can provide him with machines that follow his every command. And so, in an act of betrayal, the Foot strike the now separated Turtles in their own home, tracking the technology within their ally, Professor Honeycutt, aka the Fugitoid. I'm not going to go into depths on who he is. If you're a Turtles fan, you already know. If you're not, it's not that important to the story. Stockman is able to then send in Foot forces and take what he wants, the technology with inside Fugitoid. It's clear Stockman is very in character here. He's just there for the robot and really doesn't care about killing the Turtles, which is what makes the battle all the more painful. As it rages on, the Turtles are forced to flee, Michelangelo ushering April and Honeycutt to safety, whilst Leonardo and Casey fend off Stockman's machines. It's in their nature to hold the line and be the last ones out, but what they didn't expect was Stockman's willingness to move on, so to speak. When Honeycutt declared that he'd self-destruct before he ever let Stockman have him, Stockman reciprocated the sentiment and decided if that would be the case, then nobody could have the machine, and set his own swarm of mouses to go nuclear. The explosion leveled the building, taking the lives of Leonardo and Casey Jones. Mikey thought April died as well, and as far as she knew, so did he. The tragedy of Leo and Casey really doesn't hold any of them to blame, but instead shows the power of being ambushed and being on the back foot, and the failings of standing and sacrificing one's own safety to allow others to flee. No one soldier can fend off such an army. They have to work together. They cannot win if they fight alone. This memory also grants an important lesson in how to deal with a specific opponent. Stockman is obsessive and cares not about Hiroto's wants, but he does provide all of Hiroto's technology. So if the Resistance are to fight back against the oppressive Foot Clan, then it's him they should focus on. Michelangelo's full frontal assault from issue 1 once again is proven to be unplanned and unreasonable. He should have assessed the full battlefield before charging head on into danger. Above the sewers, Casey Marie is exposed to the world around her, and more specifically, the Foot forces, treading out her friends and her people. But she learns from her father's death, and accepts this is not a fight her or the Resistance can win, and so she leads an escape, heading to her mother and to Michelangelo. After Stockman's attack, April was rescued from the rubble, but Mikey awoke in a haze days later. April found out she was pregnant and was given her new arm and leg. Mikey rushed home before setting off to warn his father and brother in Japan. April was trapped, forced to stay in the city to endure the world as it turned against her, whilst Michelangelo was free to escape to find his family, something that would lead to his now broken psyche. After leaving the hospital, April hid herself and her daughter in the only place she felt safe, the lair in the sewers. She raised the girl on martial arts and stories of the Turtles, but for Michelangelo, well, the tale is a bit different. He wouldn't realize until his time in the mountains had passed, but that ambush had set in motion the events that would soon create the Last Ronin. And it is here where Casey Marie returns with the Resistance, and April reveals she has a plan that could finally end the war. April wants to reuse the remains of Honeycutt and target Baxter Stockman in an attempt to remove technology from under the Foot, leaving them open for the Ronin's direct attack. It's a suicide mission, but it is also the only way that they can have a chance at stopping the Foot Clan. Together, as a family, they need to fight back. They need to become a clan themselves. Meanwhile, Hiroto stands above the city, rejoicing in his loneliness, bragging about his lack of family, about his not being held back by it, how his mother and grandfather never could become him. He has replaced his clan with perfect machines, machines that never fail to catch him. This scene is beautiful, if not for how it recreates his mother's fall and has his guardian angels catch him in a similar vein, but it's also brilliant for how it establishes his reliance on the technology and not the people around him. He is right, he truly is lonely, and should his technology fail, there will be no one to catch him. And so the final battle begins. Hamato against Oroku, Ninja against Machine, Michelangelo against Hiroto, the Resistance against the Foot, the weak against the mighty. The war ends now. The battle against Stockman begins, and even now, Michelangelo is struggling to learn from the past. He acts like Leo and demands his soldiers stay back while he pushes ahead. Like Raph, he is alone. Yes, he tells himself to remain focused, to not get cocky, but he is mortal. He fumbles, he falters, and he almost dies. But luckily, Casey Marie is like her father, and far too stubborn to follow bad orders. She is the hand that reaches out and saves Michelangelo, and in that moment, he remembers, like the world is made clear once again, she is family as well, and she is as much an asset to him as he is to her. He remembers his father's teachings and scolds her, but then he remembers his brother's deaths and thanks her. I really do love this moment, because it's such a simple scene, but honestly, it just expands the growth of the Ronin so damn much. He goes from being a lone warrior, refusing to think things through, and refusing to accept those around him, to understanding the importance of those he cherishes, and learns from what has happened up to this point. Of course, before the battle, Mikey and Casey Marie trained. They sparred in the lair, and he taught her what he could. He taught her to control her rage. He taught her to use her opponents against themselves, and he taught her to think clearly and to move subtly. What I find fascinating about all of this is that if you look at chapter 1, Michelangelo does not follow any of these lessons. He understands them, but is ignorant to their importance. And it's only in being with Casey Marie that he stops acting like his brothers and starts acting like his father. And after these moments, he is confronted by April to address the final memory he has hidden away. What happened to his final brother and to his father? When Splinter and Donatello arrived in Japan, they headed to the meeting location Hiroto had set up for them and were greeted by an ambassador before being ambushed by foot warriors. But Hiroto was no honorable warrior. It wasn't until Splinter's goading broke through that he finally entered the fight himself. And even in this fight, the moment Splinter landed a notable attack on Hiroto, he showed his true colors. It was immediate, unleashing a hail of arrows over the battlefield and retreating as the Hamato clan was slain where they stood. This is an interesting element to the story, because the lesson to learn from this memory, in my opinion, is difficult to figure out. There of course is a lack of trust one should place in the Orokus, and the need to prepare to fight an unhonorable opponent, but I believe there are two other lessons here. One Michelangelo learns at first, and one he learns later, and both are based upon how each member of his family dies yet again. Donatello dies first in the battle, sacrificing himself so that the arrows do not take his father, who would later fall at the hands of countless ninja and archers still present in the fight. Michelangelo sees himself as Splinter in this coming battle, and pushes his soldiers away, including Casey Marie, out of fear that they too will die as sacrificial pawns in his bloodline's war, just like Donnie did. The second lesson is one he will learn soon, but not quite yet, so we'll come back to it. Michelangelo trusts Casey Marie to help him throughout the fight, but at a distance. While she leads the resistance, he rushes forth, attempting to ensure their safety, taking out turrets and fighting foes much more powerful than he one-on-one, so that others won't have to deal with them. But it is when April arrives and forces both him and Casey Marie into a situation where they must push on together that he realizes they need to be at his side. I love how when April arrives in the fight, the tank she has built has an anti-mouses button effectively. She ensured what happened to her husband and to who was effectively her brother would never happen again on her watch. I just really love when those sorts of moments go off in these kinds of stories. Ironically, it's Stockman's hubris and Hiruto's selfishness that allow the resistance to break into Stockman's base in the first place, as one of them doesn't call Hiruto for help, since he believes he's the aggressor, and while Hiruto thinks nothing of the gunfire and explosions going off because he doesn't care about Stockman. Now, inside the base, April readies the remnants of Honeycutt, and in-character Baxter arrives and has one sole focus, his prize. But in taking Honeycutt for himself, he opens a window for the machines to shut down all of his technology, and they even take out Stockman in the process. It's a nice element having Baxter's defeat come from his own actions. I do kind of wish we saw more of him across the comic, but I also understand in Mikey's story specifically, he really doesn't hold as much weight as the Foot Clan do. Now, with the technological element removed, Michelangelo, the Ronin, can finally complete his mission. All he has to do is stay focused. Alone in his room, Michelangelo sits. The city outside, quieter than ever, thanks to his victory over Stockman. And yet, he hasn't struck yet. His brothers berate him. They question his plan of attack. They question if he's ready, if he's even capable. And in this moment, he loses himself. In both life and in death, his brothers have bossed and ordered him around. They're gone, but their mistakes, their choices, their memories still haunt him every day. And in a final burst of rage, he demands they leave and never come back. For a long time, I don't think I really understood this scene, not properly anyway, but on reflection, I think I finally get it. The Michelangelo we met at the start of the story would have led his strike on Hiruto the very moment the machines fell. But now, the Ronin waits. He bides his time and makes sure he's prepared. He makes sure he's ready. The voices of his brothers, the ones that haunt him, are creations of his own mind. They are the dark words in the back of his head, beating up every mistake he makes. And they are the pressure, the focus that has forced him to stay on mission. But they have also been the spirits that held him back from peace. They are the message he wrote in his father's journal. No peace. And so he takes his father's book and amends his final lesson. Ready for his clan to learn from. Ready for Casey Marie to learn from. For this final fight, the Hamato clan is split up again. Michelangelo is seemingly alone, as he was at the start of the story. Meanwhile, the technology's destruction has caused mass flooding on the lower levels of the city, and both Casey and April are at the very center of it. This time, Mikey's assault on Hiruto's tower is easy, child's play compared to before. Not only has Hiruto's reliance on technology led to a neglect of training on his human soldiers, but his arrogance and brutality has led to many of them faltering in terms of loyalty. Now face to face, finally meeting, Hiruto admits he views Michelangelo's family as a false one, tied by no real blood connection, but the Ronin explains that it is not blood that makes his family a family, but the bond, the care, the lessons learned, and the help given between them. Now is the time to make an important distinction. I said that in this battle, Mikey is like he was in issue 1. He was alone. But this time, Michelangelo has the lessons of his family by his side, and the knowledge that he is not fighting for himself anymore, but for April and Casey Marie to live in peace. He is a very changed man from the moments we started with. Of course, Hiroto's disdain for familiar connection isn't limited to the Hamatos, as before Michelangelo's eyes, he stabs the unconscious Karai and takes her life, ensuring that both fighters are the last of their lineage, and that this is truly the end of a war. Their battle is epic in proportion, spanning from the tower to the rooftops and eventually even the streets. As it does, the flooding worsens and Casey once more is forced to look for her mother. As the two sons battle, Mikey begins to gain the upper hand, piercing Raph's sai through his hand and then Leo's blade through his side. But before he can give Donatello's regards via a bow staff to the face, Mikey is sliced. But the battle is back and forth, and it moves once again, this time into the sewers. Mikey now using his iconic nunchucks as a last resort. This is now a battle against time as well as Hiroto. Mikey's body is failing him. April and Casey are able to fix the pumps, and the sewer's flooding subsides, granting her the freedom to make a decision. It isn't up to Michelangelo whether he battles alone or by her side. It's up to her. She is his family, and like her mother, she won't let her sensei die alone. A sensei who now has been blown out of the city walls alongside Oroku, their fight raging on. And finally, in the mud outside the city, where our story began, Michelangelo avenges his family and takes the life of Oroku Hiroto, but at a great cost. He slumps back and feels his own breath fading. Casey Marie arriving, but all too late. In his final moments, Michelangelo gifts Casey the journal, promising her all the lessons his father taught him. But most of all, one lesson he can teach her: to know peace. What's so interesting is how every time I've read this part of the story, I've left with a completely different thing to take away from it. And now I think I can share the final lesson from his family's death. Splinter died because he refused to back down, because he let the war consume him, because he would not know peace. Mikey did not leave his room as the Last Ronin. He left it as Hamato Michelangelo and was prepared to finally end the war. But most importantly, he was prepared to let go and accept his own peace. And as he fades from life, he does just that. Awakening a bright light before him, he is home, surrounded by the family he had lost. Was it all a dream? Is this his heaven? Or is it a final hallucination before the real end? None of those questions need answering, because for those few pages, for that brief moment, the Last Ronin is happy, and he is truly at peace. The original tale of the Ninja Turtles is one about a family avenging their father's master, taking on an enemy who wronged their lineage. The first issue opens up and explains that they are hunting the Shredder because of what he did to Hamato Yoshi. Yes, it is a vengeance story, but it is also one about family. The Turtles grow together. They weren't really individuals, especially Mikey and Donnie, not at first anyway. Instead, they were a collection of brothers, looking out for each other and sticking together no matter what. As the years have gone on, I would argue that this is the only element that has remained entirely true throughout every single adaptation. The Turtles are 4 mutant brothers above anything else. Whether goofy or serious, dark or light-hearted, they are a family who care for each other. And it may seem that The Last Ronin turns this on its head, but I would disagree. The opening and closing moments aren't about the Ronin, they are about his brothers, his family. The first line spoken in issue 1 is from one of the ghosts of what he has lost. The final scene is him returning to them. The Ronin's mission is to avenge his family, and no matter how hard he tries, they never leave his side, not even in death. The story doesn't open on him preparing to take his revenge or training himself or even the family's actual deaths. It opens on the moment that leads to him building a new family, and from that, learning how to accept his old one and find peace. Throughout The Last Ronin, Mikey recollects his brothers and their final moments. He builds bonds with Casey Marie and he reunites with April. His whole story, his whole arc centers around family and the bonds he makes. Hell, even the sequels are all about family. The Lost Years is Michelangelo coming to terms with the loss of his family and understanding what it means to be haunted by them. And Re-Evolution is about the family he leaves behind and the legacy it creates. Families grow, they change and evolve, and sometimes they lose, they fall apart, but it's the memories and the lessons that are important that stick with us to the end. The Last Ronin is a love letter not only to TMNT fans, but to the idea of a family made by oneself, made with those they choose. The turtles aren't blood related, and Casey and April aren't either, but together they all have a bond they choose to forge, and one they all keep sacred. I want to end this chapter with a segment from the foreword in the back of the trade edition of The Last Ronin. Later, I again would get to experience just what a phenomenon of a multi-generational fandom Ninja Turtles really was. I was able to turn all 5 of my kids onto it as each grew up through the many eras and iterations of the property. It was part of their rites of passage that they'd learn all about the lore and legacy of the Turtles and their world through whatever medium was popular at the time. And like a science project, I got to witness them argue passionately over which movies and animation versions were truer and more authentic. The only thing they seemed to agree on were the comics. They all loved the comic. We'd read them and draw from them. So, what a mind-blowing day it was when Kevin sent us a preview of The Last Ronin issue 1. Seeing their reaction as we read it together, it felt like a full circle in their growing up. Gut-wrenching and solemn at times, exciting, life-affirming, and art-affirming. A true testament to the lasting and continuing impact this creation had on our collective lives as a family. I want to thank all of you for watching my video to the end. This is the first in a new series and I wanted to make it something particularly special. The Ninja Turtles have meant a lot to me throughout my life, and I just felt the need to make something expressing that. But I also want others to read their stories, watch their shows. I love the franchise. Hell, the whole channel here is named after it, for Christ's sakes. There's a whole bunch I didn't get to cover in the comic in this video. Plus there's 2 complete sequels, so please do read it if you haven't already. That being said, I will link my favourite comic book store down below if you don't know where else to find these books. At the time of this release, I will upload a new poll on the channel community page asking what genre October's book should be. Make sure to vote, and in 2 weeks, I'll update you all with another poll for the specific book. That being said, next month's book is going to be Woman of Tomorrow, so read up before then. Trust me, you'll want to if you have any interest in the DCU movies going forward. Thank you all again, and if you want another talkie video, kinda like this, click the thumbnail on the left. Or if you're into Marvel Rivals, check out the video on the right. And if you're up to date with the channel, then make sure to subscribe.